Hey everyone. Right, we're getting in a multiplayer, which is pretty exciting. Um, let's just remind everyone where we left off, shall we? So if I hit play here, and if you need this project, it's in the Discord server in my channel, so you can grab it from there. But yeah, we've got this character. We can walk around. We can go all stabby. We can stab our friend here. And yeah, we're not multiplayer, but we're in a pretty good place. I would say there's just one thing we need to change. And if I just get our player to stab us, and then as you can see, our health bar kind of swaps direction with us, which is not ideal. So I feel we need to fix that first before we delve into multiplayer. So let's do that now. Let's go into our prefabs folder and open up our character. And the reason why our health bar is switching around like that is our canvas for our health bar is all underneath this same transform. And if I hit the inspector here and do...
Morgan,
Hello?
we can't see your screen.
Oh, I haven't started on Discord, sorry.
Hey guys. We're looking forward to seeing the Stabby, McStabbyson. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
um. Okay, cool.
The left one looks like Odin.
Really?
A little bit.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it does look like me. It's literally me. I got doxxed. Whoa.
Yeah, so as I was saying, we have this issue where our health bar is, if I walk over here like this and back, you can see our health bar is kind of switching directions, which is not ideal. So I'm going to fix that before we delve into multiplayer, and the way we do that is we open up, go to the prefabs folder, open up our character prefab. And the reason why this is happening is we're scaling this main character transform to do the kind of switching direction, and that just transforms everything underneath it, and our canvas is underneath it. So one way we can reasonably easy fix this is if we put most of the character transform stuff under its own separate transform, and then we can leave the canvas alone. So let's do that. So if I right click character, do create empty, and I'll call this what should I call this? I'll call it main because it's most of the stuff. It's probably not the best name for it, but that's what I'll call it. Make sure you reset everything here so it all position 0, scale 1. And let's grab everything except for the canvas. So click on arm front, shift click on targets, and we'll drag all that into main. And then what that enables us to do is scale main, and there you go. See, that's not going to scale our or swap over our health bar. So that's a fix for that. Unfortunately, that will break our animator. The reason for that is our animator's on our character, and it thinks it's animating all these things that are underneath it, but they're not anymore. They're stuck underneath main. So to save us having to animate everything again, which would be seriously tedious, there's an easy fix, right? We can just remove the component from character and add the animator component to our main, and then we just need to add the controller back here, the character controller. And now you can see that our animations are happy again. Our walk is happy again, and that will have fixed most things. The only other thing is that we have our Move2D script, which presumes the animator is on this main transform. You know that it's on this main game object, and it's not anymore. It's underneath main. So there's a couple of ways of fixing that, but the very easiest way is if we open up our script, and this get component presumes that the animator component is underneath this same game object, which it isn't. But what you can do is say get component in children, like so. And what that will do is look for any animator components either in this transformer or in the children of underneath this game object, and so that will find the animator underneath main, and all should be happy. Let's save that and double check. One more thing we do need to do actually before we do that is our script is still scaling the character, and it wants to scale main. So we do need a reference to that main transform. So if I do serialize, serialize field, and private transform, and then this can be transform main. And then if I just copy that and we come down to where we're doing the scaling, which is here, this is where we're seeing whether we're flipped or not, and scaling the x by -1 or 1 dependent. This is the transform, but we actually want transform main. So let's come back here and hook up this transform main. So drag that into there, and now that will scale this correctly instead of the main character one. Okay, that should do the trick. Let's hit play and try that out. And there you go, we've got this health bar here that does not switch around, annoyingly. There's one other thing I'd quite like to tweak, in that when we're going this way it looks a little bit off center. It's not too bad that way, but it's off center this way. My guess is that's the root transform not quite being centered. Let's have a look and see. So back into our character, let's make sure these are all centered. This one's a little bit off. So center our canvas. Our main is centered. Our root is not. So there you go, that's probably the problem. 0 that. Yeah, you see that's looking better. The only problem with that is I'm pretty sure we're moving the root around on our animations. But I don't think we care about X, so we can do something pretty cool here. It's pretty handy to know this, right? Is that if we come into our animations and we have a look, yeah, you see we're changing root here. Now what I can do is if I select position X, click on curves, I can just select anything that's set there and just hit delete, and then it will default to a value of 0. And let's do the same. It'll change the others, no problem. So, you know, if we're changing Z or Y, it will change those, but it just won't change X anymore. And let's have a look at walk. Click on X. Let's have a look. We're definitely changing that. Let's just, yeah, sometimes you have to kind of scroll in to see it. And let's just select all these, hit delete, and now it won't change X at all. It will just leave it to what it's defaulted to. And it's defaulting to 0. So I think that's pretty good. So it's still changing the Y, but it's not touching the X. Same with idle. And I don't think we're affecting it on X. No, we're not changing anything on X. Good, so I think that should look a little bit better. Let's just double check. Yeah, I think that's looking more centered. Yeah, there you go. Brilliant. Okay, so I think we are in a good position now to work on our multiplayer. Right. Now there's lots of different ways to approach multiplayer in Unity. There's perhaps the most common solution for multiplayer in Unity is Photon. And that's definitely the one I've used in my past few contracts. I actually use it for fishing in Rogues itself at the moment. But the one that's kind of supports WebGL and is kind of old but nice to use is somewhat not supported anymore, and the new one is good apparently, but involves really from what I've heard from other developers, it really overrides an awful lot of Unity stuff, and if you go down that route you really can't sort of extricate yourself from that solution. So I don't know many developers that are going down the new Photon networking route, but it's definitely an option. And then Unity are coming out with their own networking solution, but it doesn't support WebGL, so I can't use it for many of my projects that are WebGL projects, and it's a little bit beta. So there's a kind of new kid on the block called FishNet, and I'd kind of heard about it maybe a couple of months ago, and I've been hearing more and more about it and talking to a lot of developers. They seem to be using it, and every developer I've talked to that's used it really likes it. And it's supposed to be about 5 times faster than Photon. So I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's definitely quite intriguing. So I thought I would use that and check that out and see how that goes. And the good thing about a lot of these networking solutions, apart from maybe the new Photon one, is that they are the concepts are pretty standard, right, across all of them. So once you've learnt the concepts, you can usually go to another solution. So learning Fishnet is definitely not a waste of time if you quite fancy using Photon or something, because a lot of the ideas like remote procedure calls and sync vars and all these sort of things are available in many of these networking solutions, and they all tend to act reasonably similarly. So let's have a look at how we get Fishnet into our project. So if I open up my browser, you want to go to the Unity Asset Store, so assetstore.unity.com, and in search for assets, search for fish-net. I've already done that and got it ready here. So once you get on this screen here, this button here will say something like add to my assets. Click that button and then you should be ready to bring Fishnet into Unity. So then if you switch back to Unity, you can open up your package manager, and if you click on this drop down, choose my assets, search for fish, which is what I've done here, and it should pop up in here. Then you want to download it. I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going to re-download it, and import. I've already imported it just to save time. So then once you've done all that, you should see a new folder in your project called Fishnet, and it's got some examples and some prefabs we're going to use, etc, etc. So I will give you a minute or two to do that if you're following along, and in the meantime, let me tell you about another asset that's pretty cool that will definitely help when you're building a multiplayer game, and that is Parallel Sync. And let me just show you where to get that from. If you just Google Parallel Sync, or go to this URL here if you want to type it in, go to the GitHub for Parallel Sync, and as you can see here, what this does, which is something that Unity does not support well, is opening the same project in multiple Unity windows. Weirdly, I'm sure this is something that used to be fine to do in Unity, but a few years ago, but not so easy now. You can have multiple Unity windows open with opening different projects, that's fine, but the same project, not so much. So this tries to, and successfully, fix that issue. So if you come down here, click on latest release, then if you download this Unity package here, double click it, that will open it up in Unity and import the package, and this will give you a new menu called Parallel Sync, and you want to open up the Clones Manager, and then I've already done that, and I've docked my Clones Manager over here. I just dragged it next to my inspector. And then you won't have these, you'll just have this add new clone button. And you want to click that, and that will go away for, depending on how fast your machine is, that will probably go away for 5 minutes or so. So go make a cup of tea, but once it's cloned, actually, it's very quick to keep everything in sync after that. So it's just the initial cloning that's slow, and then once you've got a clone, that's when you can click on Open New Editor, and you can open this project in different windows. So that is pretty cool, and you'll see the usefulness of that in a moment when we start playing around with the multiplayer stuff. Right. Let's clean up this main scene because we don't need any of this now. So I'm going to click on ball, I'm going to shift click on event system, and I'm going to hit the delete button and save. Right. Let's go to Fishnet example prefabs and drag in the network manager prefab. And then if I look at that in the inspector, we have a game object now with this network manager on, which does most of the hard work for us. And the other one that's of interest to us is this player spawner. And we want to drag and drop our character prefab into here. But before we can do that, we need to add this network object component to our character. So let's do that. If we go into prefabs under game, we've got our character in here. So if we double click that, come down to the bottom here, and we can just do add component. Let's do a search for network, and we want the second one here, which is network object. So we click that and we'll just see what it's added. It's added this network object script. Is network should be ticked, is global should be unticked. Those are the defaults. And now we're in a happy state of affairs where if we come out of our character prefab, click on network manager, we can drag and drop our character into here, like so. I'm going to save now, and if I hit play, and if I hit start server, it shouldn't do anything, but it started a server that we can have a client join. So if we click on start client, bam, we have our character in here. So that has done a network instantiation actually of this character. So to prove that, what we can do is come back to our clones manager, click on open in new editor. I just happen to have one open because just to save some time. And if we'll come back to the main one, hit play. Click start server, and then come back to this other window, this clone, and you know it's a clone because it says underscore clone underscore 0. Hit play here. And then if I hit start client, there you go, we've basically done a network instantiation, and we've got our player on the client and also here. So that is a good start. It doesn't do anything. We can still stab, but as you can see, you know, the other window doesn't do anything, and we can walk, and the other window doesn't do anything, and we can click on here and walk, and take it from me, this other window is not doing anything. So we've managed to do the instantiation bit, but we still need to sync the transform. movement, etc. across. So we're going to work on that next. I'm just going to go to Discord and see if there's any questions. Anyone want to ask any questions or any... Everyone kind of following along okay? Let me have a look in the chat. Seems like everyone's happy. Just, yeah, shout in the Hangout chat if you've got any questions, or you can always just unmute yourself and ask something, no problem. Anyway, even if like later on, if maybe you're not following on during the live stream, but you'll check it out later and try and follow along later, you can always ask me a question in the courses channel, no problem. So I'll carry on. Right, where were we? Okay, yeah, we want to add syncing the transform across the network. So let's open up our character again, and we've added this network object, and the next thing we want to add is our network transform. So again, type in network here, and at least you'll be filtering out most things, and you should be able to find network transform here. And if we click on that, we now have a network transform here, and it defaults to syncing kind of everything on the transform, right? So I mean, if we look at, and when I talk about the transform, I'm talking this, right? So position, rotation, scale. This is the main component that you're interested in really syncing, you know, initially anyway. So we're syncing position, rotation, and scale. Well, we know we don't want to sync rotation because we're not messing around with that, so that will save a bit of bandwidth. And then actually scale, we're not changing the scale on this character anymore, right? Yeah, we were, and decided that we didn't want to do that because that messes up our canvas, right? So we're not even doing that anymore, right? So we can nix scale as well, so that we're only worried about the position. That's what we're changing, right? Using the move 2D script. So that's all we need to synchronize using this network transform. Now you might rightfully be saying, well, yeah, but we are changing scale on main, right? And we need to sync that across. Well, yep, you're dead right. So let's do that. So on main, we can add the network transform here, and main's always going to be 0, right? It's always going to be moving around with a character, so we definitely don't want to synchronize position. Again, we definitely don't want to synchronize rotation. We only want to synchronize that scale that we're changing, right? Again, from the move 2D script, because we have a reference. The move 2D script has a reference to this main transform, and we're changing it, right? So this is why we want to synchronize it. And that's kind of the hard work done, really, amazingly enough. So if we come back to character, the other thing that we want to be a bit careful of, right, is we only want to move our character, right? We don't want to accept input and move around anybody else's character. So there's a couple of things we probably want to do. Let's just tackle them one at a time. The first one is that in our script, we want to check for what is kind of standardly called isOwner, which basically means we're the person who's wants to be moving this character around. So by checking for that, we check to make sure that we are the one who should be accepting input and should be moving the character around, and means that, you know, a player that we're playing against, they can't move our character around. So that is something that we need to check for, and mono behavior doesn't have the ability for that check to happen, but fishnet network behavior does. So we need to import fishnet dot, I think it's object, and then we have access to fishnet network behavior. Yeah, that's happy. And then this is what gives us the ability to ask if we're the owner of this game object, i.e. should we be handling the input. And then we can do a check in front of pretty well everything in here, really. So we want to do something like if base dot is owner, well actually if not base dot is owner, then return. That's kind of the easiest way to do that, because I can just take that line, then copy this, and again, if you think about it, unless you're the owner, you don't want to be handling anything in fixed update, because the owner handles doing all this stuff in fixed update, and then the network transform handles syncing that across the network and doing it on other machines. So we want to paste that line in there. Again, here we don't want to be able to attack unless we're the owner. And I think that's about it. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Now we'll try that out, but there is one other thing I do want to change. But let's see how we're doing. So if I hit play now, oh, let's exit prefab mode, yeah. And hit start server. And then let's go to our clone. Okay. And hit play. Start client. Yay! So we have our syncing of our position, and we actually are syncing that scale as well, right? Because we're, you know, doing that as well. Sadly, we're walking on one screen and floating like some, I don't know, Jedi Knight or something on the other one. But I mean, if you think about it, that's pretty good that we've got so far so quickly, right? In 35 minutes, so that's not too bad at all. And of course we're not syncing the attack either, right? So, and let's just see what happens if we start a client on here as well. You see that's not working or happy at all. I can't actually control anything on here, although I should be able to. And that is because our player input here is on trying to accept input on two characters here, and it, you know, we're definitely getting confused there. we only want to accept input on the character that we're going in as, right? That we should have control of. But we're accepting player input on the other person's character that's getting spawned in here, so that's not ideal. So let's fix that now. So if I come over to prefabs again and open up character, I kind of want our character to default to not being able to handle input, right? So that's good, because that's probably, you know, in a 10-player game, there's only going to be one player out of those 10 players that should be accepting input. All the others should be just being synced up by the networking system, right? So this is the safest way to be. And then what we can do is, if we go into move to D, when we get ownership, there's a pretty handy little function that gets called, which is public override void on ownership client. Yes, that's the one. And what we can do here is do a get component player input enabled equals, and we can't presume that this is getting called and we're the owner. It's this, if I hover over this, this gets called on the client after gaining or losing ownership, right? So you really do have to check here if you're the owner. So you can do a base dot is owner. There you go. That should do the trick. Let's test that out. Let's just come over to this clone window and stop this so we get the updates. Kill that. Right, so if we come over to here, hit play, and then hit start server, and then we come over to our clone window and hit play, and do start client. Now we can move around here, so obviously on this character in here our player input is ticked, right? So that enabled has been ticked here, has ticked that here, but hopefully we can't do anything here. And if I hit click on here, player input is unticked, right? Because we definitely don't want to be able to move this player around who's controlled by this screen, right? But what wasn't working last time is if our server is also got an attached client locally, we should be able to move this one around, and we can, because this is this one here and this is ticked. So that is pretty cool. Now the other thing that would be kind of nice is if we're not doing this floating thing here, and that is because we're not synchronizing the animations, right? This is moving and animating, but this one here you know, there's nothing telling it to run an animation. So let's fix that now. Okay, so come in here, game prefabs, open up our character, and well, we haven't got our animator on here anymore. We've got our animator on main. Let's close this down. So we can add a network component called network animator, and amazingly this is almost with a caveat, unfortunately, but it's not the end of the world, but this is pretty well all we need to do to at least get the walking animation working. You'll see for there's a reason why the attack animation won't work, but just by adding this network animator, we should be good. So let's double check that. Click play here again. Hit start server. Come over here. I tend to always get these dialog boxes come up, just don't keep okaying them. Just likes to complain a bit, but it's fine. Hit play. Start client. Fingers crossed. Chances of this working. Well, I told you the attack wouldn't work, right? So you can see the attack isn't happening. But will the walk work? 50-50 chance. Hey, the walk is working. Weirdly, it kind of looks a little bit jerky with just one player in. And for some reason that seems to smooth out when you add another one. Let me just add another one so you see that. Not entirely sure why that is, but anyway, I'm going to worry too much about that. But yeah, there you go, you see. Nice and smooth. And if we move this over here and move this one, the other one works as well. Okay, so we've got walking working now, but stabby does unfortunately not work, which is sad. And there's actually a pretty easy fix for that. Now, apparently there's a kind of optimization reason why Fishnet is not, because if you think about it, right, we've got these two parameters on our animator, and Fishnet is obviously dealing with the speed one happily and synchronizing that one over the network using that network animator, but it's not doing that with attack. And apparently there's a sort of optimization reason why the triggers actually are just better to do in a slightly different way, and actually you'll see how simple it is, so we can completely live with that. It's fine. So if I open up character, open up move to D, which is what does this attack. Yeah, so it's like, does this animator set trigger attack, reset trigger attack, just like the move. Now this move here, set float, is getting synced over the network, but essentially this is not. How do we fix that? Well, actually pretty easy. So if I come down here, and instead, as well as animator, we want private network animator, and let's do underscore network animator, and I think it needs a namespace. That's why it's complaining there, which is using fishnet dot component dot animating. Easy to remember. And yeah, then that's happy because it's found the network animator now. And then, just like we do this, if you remember, the network animator is also on that same main child, so we can do exactly the same, or very similar. Yeah, get component, not get component, get component in children, and that will find the network animator in main. As long as we don't add any more animators underneath that character game object, it won't get confused and we'll be happy. And why do we need that? Well, if I copy that, Control C, then what we actually do is, instead of setting this on the animator, we set it on the network animator. Simple as that. And we do the same there as well. Like I say, the move is fine. Let's not touch that. That's actually working, and we're not doing anything else. We've got no other triggers or anything we're setting. We've just got the attack at the moment, so that should do the trick, I say confidently. Let's test it out. Let's come out of prefab mode because it's just going to complain otherwise. Let's hit play. Let's open up this other window and hit play. Start server, start client. We can move, which we could do before anyway. Can we stab? Yes, we can stab. So that is now syncing the attack animation over the network. And that's pretty cool. And if we go back to our server, click start client, move that one around, and that one works as well. So we definitely have two-player multiplayer working anyway. I think that's probably where I'll leave it, because if you think about it, we've done a heck of a lot, right? I mean, we've got basic, very basic fundamentals of multiplayer working. We've got movement, we've got network animation, we've got that sort of caveated network animation, which, to be clear, you only have to do that for triggers, right? You saw that the float works, this speed here, that works. Apparently booleans work as well. What other types can you add here? Float should work, int should work, bool should work. It's just the trigger is the special case. It's just, I guess, Unity's handling a little bit differently, and it's just a bit more optimized if you call the network animator component directly to handle triggers. So that's just something to be aware of. So I think that's a pretty good place to stop. I think next time we will handle if I mean it's kind of, it looks like we're sinking health. You see they're out of sync now, right? So it looks like we're sinking health, but we're not. If you can think that both these screens are kind of trying to handle health themselves, and you really don't want that. So we'll talk about that more tomorrow, but I think that's probably a lot to take in one session, so we'll leave it at that. I hope you managed to follow along. If not, then obviously watch back the streams. They should be on YouTube. If they're not very good quality, let me know, because I can upload a better quality one if needed. And we'll carry on from where we left off here. So I will take a snapshot, I'll upload this, I'll zip it up, I'll copy this into the channel, and then if you don't quite get round to catching up for the next session tomorrow, at least you'll know that you can start off where I'm starting off, and you'll be good to go. Thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed yourself, and I'll catch you same time tomorrow.